We're going to talk about one of the earliest and greatest defeats the Roman army ever faced, which was against the Kingdom of Kush in Nubia. This defeat was largely due to pride and paranoia, which weakened the defenses of the Roman frontier in Egypt, allowing the Queen of the Kingdom of Kush to fight against the Roman army and humiliate Emperor Augustus himself. And that's the story I'm going to tell you in today's video. The clash against the Kingdom of Kush took place just 2 decades before the Roman legions perished in the forests of Germania. In fact, few events were more significant for the Roman Empire than the defeat in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, which occurred during the autumn of the year 9 AD, disrupting Emperor Augustus's expansion plans. But the battle against the Kushites would also be frustrating for the emperor. In the year 30 BC, after his triumph in the Battle of Actium, Octavian, later known as Augustus, arrived in Egypt with his army. At that time, Cleopatra had committed suicide, thus ending the Ptolemaic dynasty and leaving the throne vacant. However, Octavian refused the royal crown, instead making Egypt a Roman province. 3 years later, Octavian received the name Augustus, and Egypt, along with its vast wealth, became the private property of the emperor. To protect his jewel in the crown, Augustus determined that 3 legions would be stationed in Egyptian territory: the 3rd Legion Cyrenaica, the 22nd Dioteriana, and a legion whose name has been lost to history. In total, in 30 BC, Rome had approximately 15,000 soldiers in the province, with the main tasks of these soldiers being to maintain internal peace and patrol the southern border. Most of the soldiers were stationed in Thebes, the ancient capital, and near Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast. In the event of an enemy attack, these troops would march south to aid the border garrisons. However, all these actions were not enough for Augustus, who wished to avoid a civil war at all costs. With this goal in mind, the emperor monopolized control of the army, making all legions directly answerable to him as the commander-in-chief. However, due to the immense importance of Egypt to the empire's economy and its strategic role, Augustus appointed his close supporter Gaius Cornelius Gallus as the first governor of Roman Egypt. Unlike other provincial governors, he also received personal command of the 3 legions stationed there. However, shortly after Gallus's arrival, a revolt erupted in the south around Syene. It should not be forgotten that Egypt had just undergone a regime change, and not every Egyptian was happy with their new masters. But Gallus was more than successful. After suppressing the revolt, he moved further south, crossing the First Cataract and seizing the fortress island of Philae in the Lower Nile. His victories were so great that to commemorate his achievements, Gallus erected monuments in his honor throughout Egypt, inscribing a list of his accomplishments even on the tops of pyramids. Unsurprisingly, this did not sit well with the emperor, who realized that Gallus was a potential threat. To make matters worse, Gallus was an erudite man and a poet with a great reputation among Rome's elites. The result was a tragedy for the first Roman governor of Egypt. Stripped of all his wealth and fearing for his life, Gallus committed suicide. After this event, in an attempt to avoid risks to his personal glory, Augustus filled the vacant position with the most flexible and least ambitious man he could find, named Aelius Gallus. But unlike his predecessor, the first military incursion of Aelius, the Arabian expedition in 25 BC, was a complete failure. To complicate matters, many of the soldiers stationed in Egypt were transferred to the expeditionary force, leaving the border exposed to hostile attacks. However, Roman ambitions for conquest did not diminish. Like previous rulers of Egypt, they fantasized about Nubian gold and the other riches of Africa, motivations that were extremely tempting and seemed within their reach after the capture of Philae. However, the Romans miscalculated before embarking on their Arabian expedition. Gallus imposed a tax on areas traditionally considered part of the Kingdom of Kush. According to tradition, this act enraged the Kushite leader, Queen Amanirenas. Although we are not sure exactly what the translation of this title might be, it may mean something like Queen Mother or Regent. Even if we do not know the exact meaning, one thing is certain: Amanirenas was a formidable leader and a powerful warrior queen. In this context, in the year 24 BC, exploiting the absence of the legions, the queen led her army north to the First Cataract. The Kushite army quickly invaded the Roman garrison at Philae and entered imperial territory, advancing to Syene and Elephantine. They then retreated south with plunder, Roman prisoners, and thousands of Egyptian captives. As a final insult, the Kushites desecrated the statue of Augustus, decapitating and taking his head as war booty. Interestingly, in 1910, the bronze head of the emperor was found buried on the steps of the temple of Ammonius in Meroe, which was the capital of the Kingdom of Kush. The location was carefully chosen to ensure that everyone entering the building stepped on the image of Emperor Augustus. However, despite the formidable victory of the Kushite kingdom, the war was just beginning. Such humiliation could not be tolerated, and Rome had to respond. The new governor, Petronius, gathered a large army of over 10,000 men and marched south into Nubia. The two armies met near Selchis, a region 100 kilometers south of the First Cataract. However, despite their formidable numbers, victory seemed but a distant dream for the Romans as the Kushite troops outnumbered them 3-1. To be more precise, the Romans had around 10,000 infantry and 800 cavalry, while their enemies had an astonishing army of over 30,000 men. But it was in this moment of desperation that the discipline and training of the Roman legions proved decisive once again. Eager for blood, Petronius pressed further south into the desert. His progress, however, was hindered by the vast sand dunes. As the army marched along the banks of the Nile between the First and Second Cataracts, the Romans captured the city of Selchis. They seized control of the navigable part of the Nile River, complicating the actions of the Kushite troops. Additionally, they had another significant advantage, their superior weaponry, which was much higher in quality and efficiency than the shields and swords of Kush. Finally, the Roman army reached Napata, the ancient capital of the kingdom of Kush. Rejecting Ammonirina's offer of peace, Petronius razed the city, enslaving hundreds of inhabitants. However, the unfamiliar terrain, intense heat, and risk of disease prevented Petronius from advancing further into that territory. Instead, he decided to turn back, considering the destruction of the enemy capital a fitting punishment for those who dared challenge Roman power. On his way back, Petronius left a small Roman garrison in Selchis, extending the Roman border into Lower Nubia. After his return to Alexandria, Petronius sent war trophies and thousands of enemy prisoners to Rome. The empire restored its honor, and it seemed, at least for the time being, that the hostilities were over. But Petronius was mistaken. The success of the Roman expedition frightened the local tribes who allied with the queen, who sought revenge. This strengthened her army, and hostilities resumed, leading her soldiers northward to drive out the Roman garrison at Selchis. However, they failed to capture the fortress. Determined to defeat the Kushites once and for all, Petronius marched south once again. The details are obscure, but in 21 BC we know that both armies were exhausted when Ammonirina's offered peace. Petronius accepted, perhaps aware of Gallus's fate. The governor advised the envoys to take their case directly to the emperor. At that time, Augustus was on the Greek island of Samos, busy making an agreement with the Parthian Empire. Concerned about the actions of Parthia, a powerful eastern rival of Rome, Augustus decided to make an unpleasant but necessary decision. In a gesture of goodwill, the emperor acceded to Ammonirina's demands, including the withdrawal of all Roman armed forces from the disputed territories in Nubia. Moreover, of his own volition, Augustus revoked the taxes that had been imposed on the Kushites. To this day, scholars debate Augustus's real motivations, but it is presumed that the most likely reason is that the emperor believed the African kingdom of Kush was too far away and was the lesser annoyance compared to the neighboring Parthia, which had recently annihilated the entire Roman army led by Gaius Crassus. Furthermore, peace stabilized the southern border, allowing Augustus to transfer legions elsewhere while the Kushites regained their status as a regional power. Both sides also profited greatly from trade. The Romans collected lucrative customs duties, and the Kushites secured a pleasant source of revenue. But alliances aside, the fact remains, the warrior Queen Ammonirina's and her fierce resistance humiliated the Roman army and halted Roman expansion. After the withdrawal of Roman forces, the Kushites tore down and decapitated statues of the emperor in the reclaimed cities. However, this would not be the last historical event involving the Romans and the Kingdom of Kush. Rome continued to harbor plans for a new offensive. Half a century after Augustus's death, his great-great-grandson Nero dispatched a small expedition to the heart of Africa. Although officially tasked with discovering the source of the Nile, it seems the mission had a more nefarious purpose. Led by the elite military unit of the Roman Empire, the Praetorian Guard, an unusual choice for such an endeavor, the explorers made a detailed record of their journey, including a description of the Kushite capital, Meroe. The relocation of military units to Egypt, including the 15th Legion, the Apollinaris, and the newly created Cilician complete. However, the emperor's suicide and the bloody civil war that followed postponed Rome's plans forever. The Roman army would never again enter Nubia, and the kings and queens of Kush would never have to cede their lands, transfer their resources, or pay tribute to Rome. Even in the face of all difficulties, this warrior kingdom decided not to bow to Roman might, demonstrating admirable strength and perseverance. If you enjoyed learning more about this great battle between the Romans and the Kushites, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and also send your suggestions in the comments, and I'll do my best to make videos about the topics you send. See you in the next video.